Hello guys, Volton here and welcome to Decklist, the series where trap cards are worshipped. Today we are taking a look at Trap Machine, a build of machine that I brought personally to a 30-man tournament a month ago. Yeah, I ended up doing some school stuff and wasn't able to work on videos, so now that I have finished most of my major academic responsibilities, I am able to actually start working on videos today, and this is basically backlog that's meant to be released like a bit less than a month ago. So there was definitely some products that I was not able to have access to during the making of this deck in particular. So there are some stuff that I'll go over later on that you can consider adding to this deck. One that you see on screen because I forgot to clear the search bar. But regardless, let's go over the deck since the basic strategy still applies. Trap Machine is a build of light machine that is basically not using secret order. A lot of these variants do use secret order to have that tempo running with the ultimate flank Magpul Striker to use the incredibly powerful card that is secret order, just incredibly strong card. But once we get rid of that, we do have more space to run trap cards, basically. More traps, more effect monsters, more utility. And with the plethora of traps at our disposal, we have more ways to win by attrition to grind our opponent out and slowly but steadily win the game. Let's go over the card by card. Firstly, Mirror Innovator. This is a very powerful machine boss monster. Most machine decks will be wanting to play this anyway. This is very versatile. You can either get it to high amounts of attack or get that piercing battle damage off. Just incredibly powerful card, and sometimes it even helps you not deck out in very grindy matchups. You will mostly win these control-y grindy matchups because of Mirror Innovator. Just a very powerful card at letting you recycle your resources. We are also on 2 copies of the Ultimate Flag Mech Ace Breaker. This is monster removal. Basically, it's a bit costly, needing you to discard 2 monsters from your hand, and that's not something you can easily do on the turn you summon it. But there are situations where you can do it since 2 monsters that you tribute for the Ace Breaker plus the other 2 cards in your hand, it's able to let you use the Ace Breaker to get that push through. And sometimes that allows you to get a real big tempo push to be able to get that free damage through. But most of the time, you aim to use this alongside your trap cards so that you can have more opportunities to draw into even more traps and more monsters to be able to discard for the Ace Breaker's effect. Just having that spot removal is very nice against some matchups that have really scary big monsters that you want to get rid of easier. We also own 1 copy of Joint Tech Rex. This is back removal. We don't have Iron Onslaught in the deck for more back removal, so we are relying on the Joint Tech Rex and the Sea Dragon Knight for back removal. In matchups where it actually matters, Joint Tech Rex has the unique property of being a machine monster, which means that you can shuffle it back with the Mirror Innovator to draw back later on to have this basically recyclable use of an back row removal. Outside of that, it's not a particularly impressive card, but it still does its job fine enough, so I'm running 1 copy of it. We also own 2 copies of Shield of Boring Kong. This destroys face-down defense position monsters to gain 1000 attack. Very strong card, and if you get to pull it off, it is a huge tempo lead. And it has good synergy with some of the other cards in the deck that we'll go over later on. And if you pair this up with the Mirror Innovator, you can do a huge amount of damage in a singular turn with the piercing effect and the destruction from the Boring Kong. Now for low levels, we are on 3 copies of the Ultimate Flag Beast Surge Bicon. This cheats out your light attribute machine monsters, and you'll notice that not everything in this deck is light. Mirror Innovator is light, Ace Breaker is light, but these Boring Kongs and Joint Tech Rexes are not. That's still fine. There are some targets in the deck for this, so it's not the end of the world if you aren't always able to activate it. And just in general, Bicon is still a fine card, and you do want some way of cheating out your monsters to be able to catch up to decks like Gate Order and Thunderbolt that have these really high tempo plays with their secret orders and their parallel world gates and whatnot. Just having a way to try to catch up to them is pretty nice if you don't manage to find your disruptive trap cards. As for other machines, we're on 3 copies of Ultimate Flag Beast of Violent Wolf. This is a 1500 beat thick for machines. I do like having these a lot, just having 1 set of them. It's very nice, very safe hit into low level monsters. And most of the time you will be able to beat over things with this. There are some 1500 defenders that you might not be able to beat over them with, but those are quite rare. A lot of people don't really play those. Normally they lean towards the more utility based cards, and Abundant Wolf will be able to beat over most of those. Now there is the ground attacker Bugger Off that came with the Yuhi Strongest Battle deck, which is just straight up better than the Wolf. In specifically this deck, this didn't exist back when I was building this deck. So nowadays you can just slot this in over the Wolves. And Buggerov has 800 more defense, which is basically the only reason why you'll run this over the Wolf. But if you do choose to play Amigo, which I am not, you should keep the Wolf obviously for its attribute. But in this specific instance, just throw the Buggerov over the Wolf. Next up, the Cannon Soldier here. Very similar to a Wolf in that it is meant to be a low-level beat stick, but it has additional utility by being able to sacrifice any monster on your board for 500 burn damage. Sometimes this helps you win the game. Your opponents may be low enough that 500 points of damage is just straight up enough to kill them. And if you top deck Cannon Soldier, you can win the funny way, basically. And most of the time, you'll be using this to just clear your hand and clear your field. Let's say you have 4 low levels in hand and you have the Cannon Soldier, you can use the Cannon Soldier to sacrifice itself and then set everything else. Then you'll be drawing 1 additional card than if you hadn't used the Cannon Soldier. So that's overall pretty nice card. We're also on Crafted Drone to go with the several machines in the deck. Just additional consistency to help us draw into our better cards like our trap cards and whatnot. Just consistency is very much welcome in a lot of decks. Speaking of, we also have the 3 copies of Amazing Dealer to help us dig through our deck even more. Normally you're only able to activate this in the early game where its requirement is very likely to be live. But in this deck you also have a lot of ways to shuffle your deck. Like your Search Vicon, your Joint Type Rex, your Mirror Innovator, and that means that your Amazing Dealer has chances to be able to be activatable in the mid game as well. On top of that, we also have a Sea Dragonite to pair with the Joint Type Rex, so this is additional ways of checking back row. Even if your opponent doesn't have the duplicate for you to get that free value, just the information is good enough. Knowing that your opponent has maybe like a Mirror Force lets you play around it, and not just run headfirst into a board wipe. Caesar Torero is here for synergy with the Shield Boring Kong, but it's also just in general pretty nice and helping you beat over your opponent's monsters if they are too big, for things like your Joint Type Rex to beat over. Now for your trap cards, the Ballooning Motion and Primorphis are largely the same card. These help shift your attack position monsters on your opponent's field to defense position to be able to protect your board and keep your cards that really get additional value the more turns they stay on board, like your Ace Breaker or your Mirror Innovator, just letting them stay on board and get even more value from them. This overall super nice, and it's also the reason why we are on the more aggressively statted machines here, to be able to feel comfortable in leaving them in face-up attack position for your opponent to run into and trigger your Ballooning Motion. Now Primorphis isn't like that, it only works on your high levels, but it's still a fine card. It's basically the 4th card of your Ballooning Motion, and it is even better in 2 matchups like Dragons, like Spellcasters, that let you get that additional back removal effect off. For other non-machine trap cards, we have Crisis and Sacred Tower, and Traplet. Both of these are very strong into the format. Crisis is just in general very strong. It works against both decks. This both decks wants to Tribute Summon, but especially into Thunderbolt, where disrupting the normal summon of Thunderbolt is very impactful and lets them and prevents them from basically doing the whole Melody combo. Crisis is just very strong in that regard. Same with Traplet, which basically also works in that matchup. But it actually worked into Gate Order, unlike Crisis, which does not work against a deck that only special summons. And Traplet is also a pretty strong card. Mostly you're using it with Thunderbolt, but there are some other decks like Baseball that also special summon from Graveyard that you are very happy to have Traplet for. And lastly, the Mirror Force here, I've considered Torrential after the tournament, or Torrential didn't exist yet, but I feel like Mirror Force is still better in this deck because we don't have a really strong way of cheating out monsters. We have Vicon of course, but that's not enough compared to decks like X-Order that have Secret Order and whatnot. Yeah, just Mirror Force is just like a safer card, lets you protect your board as well, keeping your Mirror Innovator alive for even more value from it is very strong. Now for other cards in the side deck, we do have a side deck here because the tournament included side decking rules. Specifically the Galaxy Cup rules, which means that legend cards could be sided in, and if you want to know how to do that, you can just shift click them in, shift left click, drawing them into the desired deck, and you can put them in even though normally you're not allowed to do this. The card that we have chosen is the Tribute to the Doomed. You can run more legend cards, I just chose the one because that's all I felt like I needed. Tribute to the Doomed is meant for maximum monsters. Mirror Force doesn't do anything against maximums. Tribute to the Doomed does, so it's very nice to have something for that. And yeah, just good for those matchups in particular. Just even though you have the Ace Breaker, just nice to have a way to sight into that matchup even more, to be able to make sure you don't get sacked by maximum decks. Rice Terrace Ripple is a card that I wasn't that impressed by. The theory is that it's good into normal monster decks like Gate Order, but I felt like Torero already does his job fine enough. Normally you side over it in that slot. I never felt like I really needed to that much. And the Right Terrace Triple just rotted in the side deck a lot. You can choose a lot of like more niche utility monsters here that you can just run instead of the Right Terrace Triple, like more graveyard hate, like a Wording Fairy or something. Definitely a lot of things you can choose here. Right Terrace Triple is a fine choice, but there are better options that you can choose. Iron Onslaught is here for back removal, obviously for decks that have like scary back row that you want to get rid of. Iron Onslaught is very strong in that regard. Normally you also side this in there if your traps are ineffective in that matchup, like Maximum for example, where Iron Onslaught is just like better than nothing. We also have a couple traps that you can side in, like the second and third copies of the Pyro Fist for matchups that include dragons and spellcasters, where you can get that additional back row removal off. We also want Imitating Crisis for Gate Order or specifically level 7 strategies, where you can get this high value like Sakuratu armor like card basically. And Mystery Handcuff is mostly meant for Portal Loop. It didn't come up thankfully, but it's also good in the Thunderbolt where it basically prevents them from OTKing you for that turn. Even if they have additional tribute folders to still do that plays, they do need their full board for their OTK setup. And if one of their slots is filled up with something like a Sensor Duckbill and 800 attack body, they won't be able to OTK you in that situation unless you took a lot of damage earlier in the game. But most of the time it will be able to help you stay alive. And if they have like a low attack monster on board, you can use something like Mirror Innovator to be over and hopefully kill your opponent that way. As for other cards that I wasn't able to play in this deck, obviously the Bugger, I've already mentioned it, but there's also the Starter Hedgehog in the Yuhi Strongest Battle deck. Basically debuffs your opponent's monsters similar to Siesta Terraro in use case, where you want to help your monsters beat over your opponent's monsters. Some of your Acebreaker and Joy Rex don't have a good way of getting more attack, so a Starter Hedgehog is able to help you beat over them and win combat that way. Another thing that you can try is the Barrier Statue of the Inferno here. That is basically a strong hate card against Gate Order, against Thunderbolt that really want to special summon. And if they do have a removal spell for it, it doesn't feel as good, but it does mean that they spent a removal spell on this 1000 attack body instead of using it on like something like a Mirror Innovator or something that is like generally more scary. But obviously, in that specific matchup, Barrier Statue is an extremely scary card and has the opportunity to lock your opponent out of the game entirely. One thing I forgot to mention, Christed and Sacred Tower and Traplet both flip face down, which is additional synergy with the Boring Kong, which is why I decided to run the 2 copies in the first place. Just a lot of ways you can trigger it yourself, and if your opponent just plays into it, you can just use it to punish them entirely. Now that we have gone over the deck, let's take a look at some of our gameplay. Game 1 here, we played against Umi Thunderbolt. This is an interesting variant of Umi for sure, running the Grand Extreme package alongside the already established deck of Thunderbolt. Let's see how this goes here. The Crisis at the Sacred Tower will surely be very good in that matchup. We'll draw for turn a Torero, which we will probably tribute over alongside the Cannon Soldier for the Mirror Innovator. Then we will set the Crisis at the Sacred Tower for the turn. They will set their whole hand and pass the turn to us, which is very worrying for them because we do have the Boring Kong in hand. We will start with the Boring Kong, activate the effect to destroy the Megalon, which I thought was something like a Shock Dragon at the time. But alas, it was the 500 defense Megalon, which is fine I guess. We'll use the Sea Dragonite to track the back row. It is an Imp-Sealing Crisis. Then we'll use the Mirror Innovator to shuffle the Bicon back into the deck and attack with the Mirror Innovator into the set monster, which they will use Imp-Sealing on the attack. Then we will attack the rest of the monsters. We chose to shuffle back the Bicon here because once everything dies, we'll have exactly enough machines to be able to activate its effect to cheat out the monster that we maybe draw into, which was what I was hoping would happen. They will draw for turn an interesting hand here. They'll use Critical Performer to draw a card, use Sea Dragonite to check our back row, find out that it's a Crisis at the Sacred Tower. Then they will use Ship of Summon Treasure to discard the Chachalot, and then they will use the Sea Star Troop to shuffle Cannon Soldier back, tribute summon the Headbutt Chachalot. I was thinking of whether I wanted to shotgun the Crisis here, but I decided not to since it wasn't that high impact. I will be losing my monster anyway, and they already know that I do have it, so they could also be baiting us into shotgunning it, and I wanted to save it for Thunderbolt if I could. As it stands, we end up using it on the Dragon since that would have been a huge board swing for them. Unfortunately, they won't be able to do that, so now they'll just attack over Mirror Innovator and pass the turn to us. We will draw for turn nothing right now, but because of our empty graveyard, we can use Amazing Leader to discard some of our cards here and draw a new hand. We draw into successfully a Boring Kong, which will be able to destroy the Dragius, attack all the Chachalot, and our remaining Boring Kong will attack them for lethal. Our second game was, oh yikes, this hand is terrible. Their hand seems okay right now. Let's see what they draw into. They're going first, they'll draw into a Melody, which will discard off the Showers and Treasures to draw into a Grand Extreme and a Thunderbolt. They'll activate Umi and then tribute summon the Thunderbolt using the 2 Censored Dark Rolls. Unfortunate that you lose the Censored Dark Rolls that early, but at least you can actually make a play, unlike me, who is going to set 4 cards and pass a turn here. Definitely a very precarious situation against Thunderbolt for sure, but this isn't a traditional Thunderbolt list, so they have to draw something pretty good here. They do draw a pretty decent hand here. They use Chura Drago as discard foil for the Shivers and Treasures, then use the Censored Dark Roll to add it back to the hand and tribute summon it once they've activated the effect of Sea Dragonite to check out back row, which is a Crisis at the Sacred Tower. We will use the Crisis immediately because we don't want to take too much damage, especially with this awful hand. They will set a monster and attack with the Thunderbolt into our Sea Dragonite and giving us a turn. We'll draw for turn. Again, not very good here. We'll set the Crisis and our 2 monsters and pass a turn and hope that we can draw into something useful like a Amazing Dealer. They'll flip their Trigger up again to gain the attack. They'll flip the Riverdale Performer to try to get a draw, but no luck. And they'll attack into their monsters. They get unlucky and attack with something that the Riverdale Performer can't kill, so they won't be able to do damage. But it's not gonna matter when my hand is 4 traps and 1 2 tribute monster. We'll pass back to them where they will draw. Not lethal yet, but this hand is not looking too good. They will attack for 5,500 damage and pass the turn back to us, where we will draw for turn, hopefully something good here. Not good enough, we'll pass the turn back to them, where they will have the obvious lethal line here of attacking directly for game. In the third and final game here, we get to go first again, where we will draw for turn a trap card, use Crafter's Drone to discard Cannon Soldier, tribute summon the Ace Breaker, set the Crisis and the Amazing Dealer that we just drew and pass the turn. My thinking here is if the Amazing Dealer gets to live, I get to use the discard 3 effect to dig too deeper into our deck, as opposed to other cards in our hand at the moment that I wanted to keep. The Amazing Dealer seems like a nice high roll option if I ever get to keep it on the board, since otherwise I was probably going to die anyway. They'll activate Umi, set the Sea Star Trooper and pass the turn. Here, not a very good start from them. Allows us to go into the Amazing Dealer here to discard 3 cards and pass and dig to our deck even more. We discard the Boundary Motion here because we expect to be playing against Thunderbolt and it's not very good into the Thunderbolt matchup. They will Noble Summon the Crafter Drone, tribute over it for the Boring Kong, which they will Crisis at Sacred Tower, very unfortunate. We'll use the Cannon Soldier to tribute over the Boring Kong here. We didn't tribute itself because we wanted to deal more damage this turn, and Boring Kong being in defense means that it will be dealing 0 damage that turn, so we just tribute over it to make sure we can free up a space for the Yavon Wolf on our hand to attack with. Now we attack it with the Ace Breaker first because we expected it will be something like Sea Star Trooper. I know what our opponent's list is largely like, and a Sea Star Trooper boosted by Umi is going to be able to wall off both the Yavon Wolf and the Cannon Soldier should we attack into them. But our Ace Breaker won't be walled off by the 1400 defense that the Sea Star Trooper will have, so we'll attack it with the Ace Breaker to play around that, and we successfully get rewarded for it and attack with our low-level machines and pass the turn back to them. They will draw for turn a Sea Star Trooper, which they will use to shuffle the Sea Dragon Knight back into the deck and no more cards. They'll use the Sea Dragon Knight of their own to check out their back row and find a Crisis at Sacred Tower. If that didn't exist, then this Leader Lies would have killed us, or rather at least nuked the board, but luckily we have 2 copies of Crisis for them to contend with. They will Noble Summon Thunderbolt, which we will just use Crisis on. We have way too many traps already. Duplicate back row isn't going to do us that many favors, so we can probably use the Crisis on this Thunderbolt and hope that we can draw into something useful next turn to be able to kill them. They will pass the turn to us and let us draw into a Boring Kong, which will be lethal. We'll use the Cannon Soldier to get rid of some stuff here. Use the Boring Kong, kill the set monster and kill them with enough lethal damage. Our second game is against a Reptile build, a very interesting one, running 51 cards and what appears to be a Psychic package. Let's see how that goes for them. We will start the game with a draw here, drawing to the Crafter Drone, which we will discard off the other Crafter Drone and set the rest of the hand and pass the turn. This copy of the Traplet here is going to be nice since we know that they are on the third coming package that will be able to special summon them a Reptile from their graveyard. Though we don't know that right now, we will be able to find that out immediately afterwards since they will be tributing over the level 3 Noble Reptile that they need for that cost for the Caligullion, which is not particularly big, until they activate 2 copies of Caligullion to give it piercing and milling 4 cards off the top of their deck. They will attack into our monsters, attacking over the Crafter Drone, and then dealing the piercing dial damage and passing the turn to us. We will draw for turn a not a particularly strong hand. We'll normal summon Boring Kong here, and that's probably a Boring Kong. If you don't have the enabler, it doesn't really do that much. Here, it's not able to beat over the Caligullion, so we just attack over the Claudion and crash into the other one with our Cannon Soldier and pass the turn. We do have the battle emotion, so we are able to shift to the defense next turn, which is going to be very good for us. They will activate and raise Calibration to build a total of 5 cards here, and they'll do it, actually they won't do it again. They'll just set the other 2 cards here and pass the turn after attacking into a Borikong the Caligulaon, but we will battle emotion them to shift the Caligulaon into the 0 defense position, which allows us to attack over it very easily. Unfortunately, we don't draw into anything like a Mirror Innovator, but we do have a Cannon Soldier here that we can send the Amazing Dealer with, double summon the Von Wolf, set the rest of our hand, and attack with our cards here, dealing a massive chunk of damage, passing back to them. They will draw a Graceful Charity, which is very good for unbreaking their hand, which they will do so. They will see Dragon Knight to check our back row, which is a Primal Fist. Then they will use the Reptilian Count here to shuffle 3 of their Reptiles into the deck to summon the Caligulaon, but we do have the Traplet here to set their Caligulaon. We choose not to set their Sea Dragon Knight because in case they aren't able to tribute over it, we are then able to attack into it later on with something like Mirror Innovator to hopefully deal lethal damage. Unfortunately, they will be tributing over it. They will use their Enraged Calibration to build the top 5 cards of the deck, and then they will tribute summon the Aspirate and then kill our Borikong and Von Wolf. Then they will Nova Summon 2 other monsters and attack into our life points for a huge chunk of it. And they do have that Yeoman Guard in attack position, so they are very vulnerable to any 2 tribute monster. Unfortunately, we somehow managed to not find any of them. We do have a Crosser Drone, hopefully find something, but we find another Torero, which we will use to at least clear the Aspirate off the field to prevent it from just nuking our board again. Then we Nova Summon the Cannon Soldier and send the Torero away. We are feigning a battle emotion here, basically. And it allows us to basically have lethal with the Cannon Soldier next turn as well, which is very nice. We'll attack into their Aspirate with the Crafter Drone, attack into the Yeoman Guard with the Cannon Soldier and leave them 100 life points. They'll use the Seal Array here to debuff our Cannon Soldier by decent amount, then they will Nova Summon the Armored Lizard and the Alien 33 to hopefully try to go for lethal here, but we have the Mirror Force to end the game here on the spot. Second round here, their hand doesn't seem particularly strong right now, and our hand has 2 traps, which is all that I could ask for, honestly. They will draw a Aegis out of 5 houses, which they won't be using for obvious reasons. They'll Nova Summon the Joy Tyrex and pass the turn to us. We will draw a Mirror Innovator for a turn, which is very strong here. We'll be able to shuffle back the Cannon Soldier, which is distributed over to attack over Joy Tyrex, and then set the 2 trap cards and pass the turn. They'll draw not a particularly strong hand here. They use Amazing Dealer to hopefully fix that hand, but they draw into basically nothing. They do at least draw into the Grace of Charity, which draws them into more nothing, and leaves them with a 0 attack guy on board that doesn't do anything. We use the Amazing Dealer here to discard some of our traps and draw more cards. Then Nova Summon the Cannon Soldier and tribute over it for the Acebreaker, which they will use Crisis and Sacred Tower on. We'll set our own copy of that and then attack with the Mirror Innovator for a big chunk of damage and pass the turn back to them. They will be able to tribute summon the Acebreaker, which I expected them to be able to have the 2 monsters to send to the grave for. So we do use the Crisis and Sacred Tower on it, but they don't have the monsters in the first place, although it would still be good to do that. They'll set the cards here and pass the turn. We will draw for turn a Borikong, which is very strong in the position. We will use it to kill their Acebreaker, almost summon the Crafter Drone, activate the Mirror Innovator to shuffle the Acebreaker to gain piercing, set the Mirror Force, and then attack into their monsters and life points for lethal. Our third game is against Supreme Beast Magnum Overlord Turbo here. This is a maximum summon deck using the Supreme Beast Magnum Overlord. And our hand here is pretty good until you realize that Battle Emotion doesn't do anything against a maximum monster. They will draw for turn a ship of 7 treasures, which they will set alongside 2 spells and a Femtron and pass the turn back to us. Not a particularly strong start, but we don't have a particularly strong start in this matchup as well. We will set our 2 traps, Nova Summon the Acebreaker and pass back to them after attacking into their Femtron. They will draw for turn a pretty decent hand here. They will use Celebration to mill 5, they will use Ship to discard these servants and draw a card, they will use the Magical Stone Excavation to add the Celebration to mill another 5 to set up their Recurring Nightmare. They didn't find anything particularly strong here, so they will pass back to us after setting the rest of their hand. We'll use the Craft Drone, discard Acebreaker and draw a card. We'll use the Mirror Innovator to shuffle Acebreaker back into the deck to hopefully draw it back into it later in case our opponent gets to be able to maximum summon. We will attack into our opponent with our cards here and pass the turn back to them. Then they will draw the last remaining piece that they were missing, activate Recurring Nightmare, and then attack into our Acebreaker and pass back to us after maximum summoning. We will draw for turn a pretty interesting hand. This doesn't directly out it, but we do have a way to get enough attack points to beat over the Supreme Beast Magnum Overlord exactly, gaining an exact total of 100 extra attack over his maximum monster and passing the turn. They already had the Stone Excavation set, so they are able to retrieve the Recurring Nightmare to add the 2 missing pieces that they did not have to their hand to be able to maximum summon again, attack over the Mirror Innovator and pass the turn back to us. We will draw for turn a Cannon Soldier, and their low life total means that we have exactly enough to game him right now. Round 2 here, you may have noticed that they were on like Wicked Shadow Dark Lurker and whatnot. And that was because they were on a zombie package, but they seem to have sided it out for a machine package smoke screen. Remember that the tournament was with side decks. So now that they have sided into the machine deck, they will be starting the turn here with a heavenly gift to discard their cards out and draw more cards, and don't really find anything particularly useful here. They'll just set 3 cards and pass the turn. We'll draw with the character drone, use the cannon soldier to send it to the graveyard, emptying our hand, normal summon 2 other low levels and attacking into their empty board state to get in for the damage and passing the turn. They will draw for turn, not particularly anything interesting yet. They'll use Scale Liberation to try to find something for Recurring Nightmare, but no luck. They'll use the Scale Liberation again after adding it back to the Magical Stone Excavation to try to find something, which they do not manage to find it just yet, but they will add some pieces back to tribute over with the Peacock Picotron to draw more cards. They'll use the Celestial Severance to try to find something, but no luck again. They'll then use the Marinovator to shovel back some pieces to be able to draw into them later on. They'll attack with their souped up Marinovator into our Crafter Drone, the Cannon Soldier rather, and pass the turn. We'll use the Sea Dragon Knight to check what they have. Turns out it is a Crisis at the Sacred Tower, which is going to pose a problem for the singular 1-2 tribute that we have in our hand. We'll try to find something with Amazing Dealer to find a out to that back row, which we do manage to find in the form of Tribute to Doom, which will get rid of their lone attacker and let us swing in for lethal. This is our finals match, and you may notice that this is the exact same person. They made it out of losers bracket and back into the grand finals because this was double elimination. That was definitely good on their part. Unfortunately, this matchup is kind of rough for them once the machine player knows what they're doing, which I did. They will draw for turn a maximum piece, which they will keep in their hand and set everything else and pass the turn. We'll draw for turn a Crafter Drone, which we will be keeping to discard the rest of our hand and draw more cards. We kept the Crafter Drone because we could, in theory, draw even more cards if we don't draw anything particularly useful with the first batch of Amazing Dealer draws. We'll use the Crafter Drone to discard the Crafter Drone here and draw a card. Then we'll use the Cannon Soldier to send the Amazing Dealer to the grave and set another one and set the back row of the Crisis at the Sacred Tower and pass the turn back to them. They will draw for turn a Celestial Severance, which they will use to send off the top a maximum piece, and then I'll tribute over it for the Picotron, which will draw 2 and mill 2. Celestial Severance will activate again with another copy that they drew off the top, sending the Dead Ruler into the graveyard. Then they will tribute summon another Peacock Picotron to draw 2 and mill 2, activating their Red Scale Liberation to try to find something here. They are trying to find the Recurring Nightmare here to add back their maximum pieces, but no luck just yet. But they are able to find it right now, which they will use with the Magical Stone Excavation that they have to maximum summon on turn 3, which is very good for them. They'll attack over our Crafter Drone and pass the turn back to us, where we will draw Acebreaker. We drew the Acebreaker. We'll use the Cannon Soldier to send the Amazing Dealer to the graveyard. Then we will use the Bicon to tribute the Acebreaker for 1 single tribute, which will give us the hand to discard off of Acebreaker's effect. And then we will attack for lethal right here. If we didn't activate the Crafter Drone here, we wouldn't have lethal just yet, I believe. Second round of finals here, we already drew into the Tribute to the Doom, which is a very good draw into this matchup. We did side this in because, well, it's very good in this matchup, and this entire reason is in the side deck. They will draw a Celestial Severance, which they will use to find off the top a copy of the Femtron, which is very good for the Peacock Picotron that is in their hand. They will probably use it to draw 2 cards and mill 2 cards. They will use nothing, set 3 back row and pass the turn. We will draw for turn another Boring Kong, not particularly what you want to see here, and we'll use it to attack into them and set Tribute to them and pass back to them. They'll draw the maximum monster right here, which is good for them, but also I have the Tribute to the Doom to be able to destroy it for free. They'll use Scale Liberation to get rid of a card in the back row to be able to free up the space for another back row and pass the turn, where we will use the Tribute to the Doom here, destroy the maximum monster, use the Boring Kong to shovel back some pieces here. This is not meant to cheat out or summon because we can't do that. We are just using it to shovel back the Boring Kong for future turns. Then we will use the Boring Kong that we have on field to attack into them. They will draw for turn a Marinovator, which they will discard for the Heavenly Gift. Then they will use the Nana to draw 2 cards after putting back the Marinovator, using a Marinovator that draws top to draw into more cards. And they are unable to find a maximum piece, so they will pass back to us. We'll use the Sea Dragon Knight to destroy the Heavenly Gift, then normal summon the Marinovator, which they will unfortunately use the Crisis on. But we are able to use the Cannon Soldier and the Boring Kong that we have to attack into their monsters and pass back to them. They will draw for turn. Basically, this is good enough. They'll use the Ship of Sun Treasures that they added off of the Marinovator to draw into the Recurring Nightmare, which they will then promptly use to add back their maximum pieces and attack into our Marinovator and pass back to us with a threatening maximum monster, which then we draw into Acebreaker, and then we use the effect of Acebreaker to then destroy all the hard work and dreams that they had in terms of playing maximum monsters. And those were the games. Let's take a look at the reasons to or not to play this deck. Firstly, this deck has a lot of ways to interact with your opponent that comes hand in hand with the sheer number of traps that we're playing, but it's also important to note the just variety of ways we can interact with our opponent. We can interact with our opponent's tribute summons, or opponent's special summons from the graveyard, or just in general their attacks with Battle Emotion and the Mirror Force. And Battle Emotion is also a way to interact with attacks that are protected from destruction from trap effects that Mirror Force would otherwise not be able to touch. Just a lot of ways to interact with what your opponent is doing, and if there are any extremely strong plays that are absolutely must things to stop, these traps can really put a damper on your opponent's strategy. And it's just a good way of preventing your opponent from doing any shenanigans that might just completely blow you up. Secondly, this deck has Kill Pressure. A Mirror Innovator is a very strong card that lets you just kill your opponent through set monsters and even just makes you unable to deck out. And Boring Kong is another contributor to that fact, just blowing up set monsters, allowing you to get in for more damage. It just gives you that really strong like 1-2 punch where you disrupt their play and then afterwards follow it up with these extremely strong normal summons that just blow your opponent up. And in extremely drawn out games, Mirror Innovator can give you that reach to kill your opponent through its effect and to basically always win a grind game. Thirdly, there is a lot of space for tech cards. Because of the fact that we're not running something like Aim, Eagle, or Secret Order, we have a lot of space to just run cards that are more generic, that are just very utility, or rather are very strong and just have good utility effects, like the Siesta Torero, the Sea Dragon Knight, Amazing Dealer, and whatnot. Just it gives us a lot of freedom to do what we want with the deck. There are a lot of other options that we talked about at the start of the video as well, that you can just easily slot in, and there's a lot of just free space to run decks that you yourself want to play. Now for reasons why you shouldn't play this deck. Firstly, this deck is slow. We do have the Ultimate Flag Beast Search Bicon to cheat out our Mirror Innovators and Ace Breakers, but that doesn't really compare to like Secret Order, Execute Up, or just in general the speed at which the other decks in the format can really just pop off Thunderbolt, Gate Order, and whatnot. And if you don't find your traps, you can find yourself getting easily outpaced by those decks. Secondly, sometimes your traps just don't do anything. You will notice that some of these traps have very specific activation windows, like Traplet is only activatable when your opponent special summons a monster from the graveyard. The Crisis at the Sacred Tower works only when your opponent normal summons a level 7 or higher, and it only hits effect monsters. And in some matchups, these don't do much. Traplet, let's say against the Mirror, for example, if they're not playing Secret Order, this doesn't do anything. Crisis generally will do something against most decks, while you're playing against Gate Order, this doesn't do anything. And this problem is soothed over by the side deck, but if you're not playing with the side deck, this will come down to your personal preference and your understanding of the environment that you're playing in. So if you're playing in a more casual environment, I'd suggest cutting stuff like Traplet for more generically useful cards, basically. And finally, the deck is quite susceptible to Crisis at the Sacred Tower. That's not saying that much. A lot of decks would definitely not like to be being on the receiving end of a card like this. But in this deck, we don't have a lot of ways of cracking back if your opponent decides to Crisis you. There are all ways to allow us to get multiple 2 tribute monsters on the field at once, but it is in the form of a singular card in the deck, and other than that, if our only normal summon is disrupted, we have to just sit and pray and hope that we get a good hand next turn. And a lot of cards in our deck also can only activate during the turn they are normal or special summoned, like the Shield Boring Kong, they can only activate on normal summon. Same with the Joint Type Rex. If they Crisis at the Sacred Tower and they don't kill it, you don't get to even just activate it next turn and just like get the effects of if they get disrupted in any way, which is definitely very unfortunate. But Crisis at the Sacred Tower is a very just like universally strong card anyway. Though definitely a very popular card, so you will want to take note of that when you try to play this deck. And overall, this deck just feels good to play. It honestly just caters to my playstyle quite well. I like to be able to interact with my opponents a lot, and this deck and lineup just really solidifies that game plan and makes me feel quite good at playing it. Honestly, just like the game flow just feels smooth, especially when you draw all your traps in time. And yeah, it just feels good to play, honestly. Don't know what else to say about it. And that'll do for the deck profile. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.